Welcome back, everybody. Another edition here of the Auburn Undercover podcast on the 24/7 Sports Network. My name is Nathan King, joined here by Jason Caldwell, Christian Clemente, and our publisher, Ronnie Sanders. This is not a podcast or an episode or anything that we ever wanted to get on here and do. But as many know, not only on our website and in our community, but in the Auburn community, period, the Auburn sports community, Phillip Marshall passed away last Friday. He was the titan of Auburn sports journalism for the better part of a half century. Obviously continuing the legacy that his dad left as being just a tremendously decorated sports writer, but more than that, as we'll talk about here, Phillip was our friend. Phillip was our mentor, and there was, I think, one thing that kind of shined through in the wake of this news and getting the outpouring of love from everybody is there was only one Phillip. Like, any way you define that or slice it, or whether you're talking about work or life or personality, there will never be another person quite like Phillip Marshall. And Ronnie, it's just been it's been a tough past few days for us. I know for you specifically, you've had such a long-standing relationship with Phillip. You and him built this site together, basically all the way back in 2008, and he left quite a legacy behind, and obviously leaves a massive void in our hearts and obviously in this community.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a tough few days for me, and I know for y'all as well. But yeah, I mean, the first phone call I made after I got a yes from investors was to Phillip when I started the site, and we recruited him, and he finally came on board, and I tell you, about probably, I don't know, it was 3 or 4 months in, I was in Charleston, was up there to see Ellis Johnson, and he was the head coach at the Citadel, and I never will forget. Phillip called me, and I don't even remember what it was about now. But I was standing in the hotel room, and we were screaming at each other on the phone, and we didn't know it. We didn't know each other well, And he threatened to go back to the Huntsville Times, and I was about ready to let him go, and if he wanted to go, and but we ended up, we worked through it, and next thing you know, we had a coaching search, and things kind of took off for us, and neither one of us knew much anything when we started, but we figured it out along the way. But he was one of a kind. I mean, he worked as hard as anybody I've ever been around.
Yeah, he I believe it was Charles Goldberg said in our story that we had of just thoughts from everybody in the community, his friends, coaches, players, just everybody that he had gotten to know. Charles Goldberg said, my friend did what he loved till the very end. And, Jason, looking back now, it's, it was a lot of fun to be around Phillip the last few years as he sort of made the decision. He lived back home in Decatur to be closer to his grandchildren, to his family. But he made the trip to Auburn a lot the past 2 or 3 years. And looking back now, that really was a blessing, I think, to have him around so much, because there were a couple years there, particularly COVID, just made things difficult. But you and me and Christian were around Phillip very, very often the past few years during football season. And again, there's just, I think Butch said it in that story of, like, you knew when Phillip was in the room. And I thought that was pretty apt to describe how he was in a work setting.
Yeah, no, the people that have known him for a long time go, you're like, that's it. You knew when Phillip was around, and Butch was. I was actually at baseball practice when I was actually on the radio when Ronnie said, "Hey, we need to get him a call," and then I was at baseball at the time, so I was able to walk down and tell Butch and Gabe Gross and those guys, and Butch was like, "I sure am glad he came to the regional last year." Same thing, Nathan. You're talking about basketball, like he got to do some of those things one more time, and so. It was good, but he's like, yeah, he said he was laughing because he's like, Phillip didn't, like, you might not be anybody else in a room, or there might as well not need be anybody else in a room, because he was the guy who's going to do what he wanted to do, and he was going to ask his question, and that was what he did. And so, just interesting memories when you think, think about, the times and over the years, and, from, obviously I won't say we were never competitors. Now, as an old newspaper guy, Phillip always wanted to get the story, and he always wanted to be first, but you never felt like he was going to do that to run somebody else down. It was always, hey, and he was willing to help and lift people up. And so I think that's a part I think I remember, like, listen, you can be the most dogged reporter you want to be, but you can also still be friendly. And I think that was the thing. You go, man, like everybody that he went up and talked to, he's like, they left probably laughing at a story, as that was kind of the way you did.
Jason, you make a great point. He would tell me all the time. He's like, hey, look, and he was 100% accurate. He said, I'll give you the shirt off my back. I'll give you food. I'll give you whatever. He's like, but I'm not giving you my story. And he would talk about it. All the guys on the beat were his good friends and this and that and the other. And he's like, hey, I love Charles Goldberg. I love this guy. I love that guy. He said, but if I've got a story, it's mine. You're not getting it.
Yeah, even goodness, just a month ago, all of us were various places. I remember I was driving to the Auburn basketball game in Atlanta. They were playing Chattanooga, and it was just like a transfer portal story. And so I called Phillip to see if he could write it up. And they talk about dotting your I's and wanting to be as precise as possible and making sure we had it, making sure that that it was confirmed and that it was a good source. Like Phillip in the era of just sort of letting things fly on social media. Like Phillip called me back and he was like, this is all, this is just, I'm only seeing this on social media or X or whatever. Like, and I tried explaining to him, and it's like, it's the social media era. Phillip never lost his pillars of being a responsible reporter. And, he kind of set that example for all of us. Like me and Christian, obviously didn't know him as long, but between the two of us combined, 10, 11 years. And Christian, I always sort of told people Phillip was like my moral compass when it came to this job, like, because it was so basic and true, but at the same time, because it was so basic, it was so poignant, if that makes any sense. Like, he really did have that old school newspaper approach, and just his outlook on this job on a daily basis. I think for young guys like us, it really sort of grounded you and told you, hey, this is what's important, and all that other stuff really doesn't matter.
And he really cared about us.
Yeah.
And he cared about the interns that we brought in as well. And he took them under his wing, and he tried to show them the ropes. And, Phillip is maybe more blunt than some other people would be. But he did it in a caring way because he wanted them to be their best. And Nathan, you brought it up either in a story or in a group chat or something like that. Phillip was really, really close friends with JG Tate over at Rivals and On 3 now. And Nathan, we both interned under JG at the original Auburn Sports before the merger now. And so we're still obviously friendly with him, great friends with him. And, we'll talk with him before different media opportunities and whatnot. And Phillip would come strolling in, and, he was probably at a back table talking to someone about some story. And he'd see Jay talking to one of us, and he would say to Jay, did I tell you that you could talk to my reporters? And Jay was his go-to. Those two went at it like none other in the most friendly banter way possible. I mean, the stories of just those two going at it is unmatched. That was one of the stories that I posted on our board before the Harsin intro presser. But Nathan, going back to kind of what you were saying, just he really cared about us. He wanted us to be our best as people, as writers, and as a site as a whole.
Yeah,
and Christian, he was always that way. I mean, the quality of the work mattered more than, in this era of social media and Twitter reactions and all those things. I mean, his philosophy was do a good job and subscriptions and page views will come. And his number one goal was being the best that he could be. And that was from the day I met him till the day that he passed away. I mean, he wanted things done right, and he wanted them done. He believed in there was a certain way to do things, and that's the way we needed to do it. And that's what we did them for 18 years, and the way we'll keep doing them.
Yep. No, it's, Nathan was mentioning, you get fortunate to be able to work with people. And obviously I worked with Mark Murphy a long time, and Mark retired. And then, Phillip kind of bridged the gap, and I'm like, got to work with two of those guys. And I consider it one of the biggest blessings of my life to be able to have somebody, like you said, that said, look, this is the way it's done. And to always be able to learn how to do things, how to approach stories. And you're right. The most important thing is to get it right. The most important thing is not to be first. The most important thing is to get it right. And that's always the goal. And that's always what Phillip did. Look, hey, you might miss a minute detail of it, but you want to be right. And that's it. When you're right, it doesn't matter. And I think that was always the thing that you take from is like, look, get the story correct. You're going to do it first, but make sure you're right. And that was always one of the things that stood out to me.
Yeah, he had one in 18 years. I remember one story that he was wrong on, and he was right when he wrote it. And the story went up, and it changed. Nathan, you may remember. I mean, he lost it. I mean, he apologized profusely, and I'm like, Phillip, everybody makes mistakes, and it wasn't even a mistake when you put it up. It was right, And but he always wanted to be right. And he always wanted to be first, but he wanted to be right. And another tip he gave me was, hey, look, I've broken a bunch of small stories. I've broken a bunch of big stories over the years by not breaking a bunch of small ones. And I think he meant, hey, I don't go looking for little things to piss people off. I want to break the big one. And goodness knows he broke a bunch of big ones.
Yeah, it's just, I think we all sort of utilized and emulated and tried to, get the advice from Phillip as often as we could, because he was this, wealth of knowledge, not just on this business, but obviously covering Auburn for so long. I did it a lot in my early time here. I just, Jason and I got a lot closer a couple years into my time at this site, but early on, if I had a question just about like, hey, what was this thing that happened at Auburn 20 years ago? Like it was incredible to just be able to call him. But Phillip had such a Christian, you mentioned, he had that bluntness about him that is just, incomparable. But I wrote this in after he passed away, like it never felt demeaning. I personally never, I mean, Phillip would love to crack jokes, and we'd sit there and do that all day. But I'm not sure I ever once heard him like speak ill of somebody, if that makes sense, like speak down on somebody. You can say jokey things or whatever, but like I never once got the impression from me and to anybody else, I mean, like that Phillip would ever think or talk that way. I mean, just a very genuinely kind-hearted person. And that permeated into some great stories throughout the beat. There's the one of our friends where he definitely did not remember their names at SEC Media Days a few years ago. So he just, there they are, and keeps on walking. But I mean, Phillip always greeted you with a big smile on his face. And Christian, looking back on it, I think it was November, definitely. And he was sat in the football facility with us, and it was all just a bunch of younger people with him. I don't remember who all was at that table, but it was you and me and a few other people that he had not known collectively very long. And I think he relished having those like 20 minutes where he was just hip firing story after story, and we were eating it up. I think he really relished getting those opportunities to talk with us about that stuff.
Even recently during portal season, he was there a couple of days getting some softball interviews, because that had almost become his passion. Some of those sports that are still true college sports now, where it's not just money and driven by agents and all that kind of stuff, but he was getting those interviews, and so he was in town, and so he came over to the football facility. And you and I were there, and Jason was there, and Jeffrey Lee was around, and so they were reminiscing on older stories. But then Peter Radicus of AL.com, Adam Cole of the Montgomery Advertiser, some of these younger guys, we were getting to ask him questions, just prompt him, give us a story, tell us about this moment. You mentioned this beforehand, the shoe story in Nashville. iconic. I'm sure he definitely, not during portal season, but Nathan, you brought it up, and I think in your reflections that you did today to honor Phillip on Sunday, the horse interview. We had to have heard that statement at least 3 times this past football season
for
alone.
years.
Yes.
Yeah, Phillip really wanted to interview a horse.
Yes,
because he said the equestrian. He said they deserve the spotlight. They're athletes too. And
then that was the biggest home field advantage you have is that the horses don't travel. So like Auburn's horses stay here. So Auburn's they get to, and that's a home horse advantage. And he always wanted to do that story. He never got to do it. You're right.
That would have been a tremendous. I told Patrick, I said, we have to get this on video. I would pay so much money to see him with a recorder up to a horse. It's the Nashville shoe story is my favorite one. I can't remember at what point he told us this past year, but it must have been a couple decades ago. And y'all too, correct me on any details if you know it and if I'm wrong. But he was in Nashville for the SEC tournament, and Auburn had an early tip-off, and they were out the previous night. And Phillip wakes up from being out the previous night on the couch in the media center with no shoes on. Just found himself there. Everyone's gone. Everyone's at the basketball game. It tips off in an hour or so. Everyone's looking around wondering where Phillip was. And as he tells the story, he got up, realized, game was at, whatever time, starts walking down in downtown Nashville looking for the nearest shoe store. And he said he found one. He walked in. Again, key detail here, he was barefoot. Walks in and the sales woman says, hey, can I help you find anything? He said, young lady, you're about to make the easiest sale of your life. And there's no replicating how he delivered that line right there. But that one is the one that gets me for sure. We'll be able to, I wrote it in the reflections this morning. Like it really is I wish I had written down more, like in the moment, you wish you just commit them to memory. But even just the past few days thinking back, like stuff comes back, it slowly trickles back into your brain. So I'm looking forward to, with you guys, sort of honoring Phillip's legacy in that way. And just like, this is not going to be just a few days of honoring Phillip and, we'll have his service this week. Like, I think both the funny side and the professional side, like he really is going to have his imprint on this site and on Auburn for a long time.
100%, and you talk about, Phillip was certainly one of a kind. I mean, I never will forget. He broke the Chizik story being hired, but Chizik getting hired, and at that point in time, we were part of ESPN, and they were supposed to take our stories and run them, and ESPN was building this fledgling network, which eventually fell apart, and but in any case, the guys at ESPN told him that he was going to have to prove himself. And I thought that he was going to lose his mind. I mean, I'll leave out the expletives, but he basically said, he's like, look, I've been proving myself for 40 years. I don't need, and, but we ended up, I called up there and they finally added us to they credited AL.com and the AP, I think, but even though Phillip had it first, but they ended up putting Auburn Undercover and crediting us finally. But I knew he just, I mean, he was about ready to completely lose it, because if anybody had proven themselves, he had.
Yeah, I think you like, I don't know if it's not individual stories, but you think about the amount of coaches, where you walk up and like I think about, like, obviously I talked to Hal Baird the other night and him and Hal, really close friends. They talk still all the time. Obviously, Kevin Steele. I think about like a guy like Joe Witt. Every time he saw Joe, called him Josephine. Hey, Josephine. And them two would sit down and talk, and that's what they did. That's the part of this business that is getting lost because there's so much separation now. You can still find it in the smaller sports, and Christian, I think that's why you go to softball and you go to other sports more, because they're still as open as football used to be when I started this in 1999 or whatever year it was, where you could go sit on a hallway and go talk to coaches. It's hard to do that now. It's hard to build that type of relationship. That's what Phillip was. He was a relationship person. And so I think you see that those are the people that you still come back to is those coaches that he was around so much and spent so much time with.
Yeah, I mean,
And Jason, I'm sorry, Nathan, go ahead.
I was just going to say real quick. I mean, Christian, you mentioned I wrote about it in the reflections, but like when we were at practice for football or any sort of setting, it was always so much more important for Phillip to talk about what made somebody who they are and not the sports side of things. Like that was obviously always there, but like how many times, we got Jeremiah Cobb and Phillip. What did Phillip want to focus on? Like, hey man, you're about to be in your whatever season here. You're so loyal. You decided to stick around. Like that's what Phillip wanted to focus on. Peyton Thorne getting criticized, up and down during his couple seasons. And Phillip writes an incredible story about his family and the late Jeff Thorne, his father, who passed away, and Phillip maintained a close relationship with him. Jackson Arnold comes over from Oklahoma. All Phillip sees is a kid who hasn't, wants to prove his doubters wrong and has a bunch of talent. He didn't care about his numbers. I put the photo in there of Janai Broom in Atlanta in the second weekend of the tournament last year. But Janai Broom is probably, in my opinion, the best player ever to play at Auburn. But Phillip cared more about where he came from. He has his family tattooed on him. He has his hometown quite literally tattooed on him. Like that's what Phillip saw first and foremost. And Christian, on a daily basis, like at football practice in particular, I think of that interaction between him and Xavier Chappell in that photo that hopefully makes the rounds. And that is what we saw every single day between him and players and coaches.
You saw it with players, you saw it with coaches, you saw it with SIDs, with other media people. I mean, that was just kind of who he was. Nathan, our buddy Jake Weiss, who used to cover Auburn and is over in Texas now, brought up a story of back during COVID when we were on Zoom. I think it was Chad Morris. We were talking, the whole beat, the pre-media things during COVID on Zoom. That little bit of time we all got together, before it actually started to kind of talk was our really only time around each other. And so people were really soaking that up. And, Phillip would usually, as kind of always, command that, and everyone would want to talk to him and have questions for him. And he's telling a story about what Skybar used to be beforehand or something along those lines. I can't remember exactly. And Chad, and it cuts, the Auburn picture on the Zoom cuts on, and Chad Morris is sitting there, and Phillip's not paying attention because he's deep in the middle of his story. Probably 30 seconds to a minute goes by of him continuing to say this story, and Chad Morris is just sitting there grinning ear to ear, having a great time. And then Kirk, the SID, finally unmutes and goes, "All right, we'll go ahead and get started here." And Chad was like, "That was awesome." He's like, I was loving hearing that. He was like, "I was having a blast." He's like, "Let's keep that going after this." And I think Chad did stay on for a little bit after. And that was kind of who Phillip was.
Yeah, and back to what Jason was saying earlier, chips. He loved to be around the coaches, and Nathan, he loved to tell their stories. And two of the, as the news kind of, as I was making phone calls and telling those who, obviously sent you guys a text and said, "Hey, let's jump on a call real quick." And then I started making other phone calls, called Joe Witt, called Pete Jenkins. And those guys were genuinely upset. They had known him for decades, and we're still in touch with him, still talked with him. And those are and look, he would say that, look, the business has changed. I can't, like used to, I would just go back and hang out in Tuberville's office, and he did. And he'd walk up and down the halls, and we got Terry Bowden on now doing a show, and Terry he talked about, he said, "Hey, it wasn't just a professional relationship. We'd go out and I could close the door and say, and we could just talk about whatever. We'd go out and hang out together, and it was a different time because coaches and reporters don't really do that anymore."
Yeah, and Jason, to Jason's point, I think Phillip did such a great job of, and that's why I feel, like Jason said, like I feel so lucky and so blessed to have been in this position of him setting that example for all of us, of how to go about this job on a daily basis. I said it somewhere the past couple of days, but Phillip one time told me, like, I can't remember what the context was, but, and I tell people this quote all the time, like, everybody's just a kid from somewhere just trying to do their best. And that always sticks with me every time I'm writing a feature or trying to get to know a player or coach. Like, Phillip really did see the good in people, which I think was, something that's lost nowadays. And I know he, I referenced a column that he wrote in September about just all the hate in the world. And, he said in that column, he said, I wonder how much I can do about that besides making sure I'm a good person, my family are good people. But, Jason, I hope Phillip realized, and I think he did, but I hope he realized that he did do so much in that regard just by being who he was, for the people around him.
I think so. I think, you probably never really appreciate it until you don't get a chance to appreciate it. But I do think again, I think you understand maybe the impact, even if you don't want to acknowledge it. And I have to find it really quick, but a couple of Sunday nights ago at church, there was a quote, and I showed it to Butch Thompson because I thought it was such a meaningful thing, and it reminds me a little bit of kind of what we're talking about. And it was, success is not dangerous. Pride in success is. That's it. Look, you can be successful, and he was, but he wasn't going to tell you. And that's it. I mean, that's what you strive for in this world. You should. You don't need anybody to pat you on the back, and you don't need to pat yourself on the back either. And I think that's the learning part of this for us. We were laughing about it today, going, look, you can go and go, hey, we're just gonna, we're gonna mourn the last person who would ever want us to do that and interfere with our job is Phillip. You got a job to do. Go do your job.
If we don't have a story up at midnight, that's a problem.
Yeah, thanks for reminding. Thanks for remembering me, and we appreciate it. But go do your job.
That's right.
That's what we're doing, and so that's what we'll continue to do. And that's the only way. That's the only way he would want it.
Yeah, at least one story up by midnight.
Yes,
if not all of them.
If not all of them, that's right. That's exactly right.
Well, guys, I think, like I said, this is something that is going to have, an impact, just not just from a logistics perspective. I mean, that's the last thing have thought about or any of that, but like, it's different when we work for 24/7, we work for CBS, we work for these big companies. Technically, all of us work with a lot of people, but we really don't. We really work with us right here. We really just work with a handful of people on a daily basis. I don't think there's a lot of jobs like that are basically this little, just a little group chat that we just talk in all the time. And so to lose, somebody that you've just had that daily interaction with, it's definitely been jarring, and it's going to take some time for it to really, I don't think it'll ever feel normal again, because again, Phillip just commanded such a different type of presence than anybody else. But my point in saying all that is, we're going to continue to, it's not just going to be a few days worth of columns and tributes and podcasts and stuff like that. We're going to honor Phillip, for a long time, and continue to do what, like Jason said, do every day what he would do. And that's not difficult for us to know what he would want to do, because he told us and he showed us every day on the website, and not just in our work, but the kind of people that we're supposed to be and kind of relationships we're supposed to have. And so, this will be our tribute episode, but Phillip is going to be, his imprint will be on our site and on our community for a long time.
Yeah. Till the end. He had a column and then coffee with Phillip, and then he was emailing Ronnie about the site.
He was.
At midnight.
Yes.
At midnight. And we were going to talk at I burned my hand, and and I had emailed him, and we were going to talk. I said, I'll talk to you tomorrow. because I was going to get this hand fixed or worked on with the doctor. And he emailed me back at I had emailed him, I guess, I don't know, around 11 o'clock. He emailed me back at 12:26, complaining that somebody had unpinned his story.
Which was either me or Nathan.
Sorry,
Phillip.
Yeah.
It was up for 24 hours, Phillip. I'm sorry. Classic. Well, guys, I think we'll go ahead and call it there for this specific episode. But we've done lots of stuff at the site, and we'll have some information on the site about the charity that Phillip's family would like people in lieu of flowers or anything like that. If you feel called or compelled to think about something like that, we'll have something on the website that's kind of in conjunction with his service this week. If you feel like you want to do that, but more than anything, I mean the outpouring of, I hesitate to say support. It's just been like the reactions from everybody.
Just getting to hear people how much they loved Phillip from
exactly
however view it was. I mean, there was someone posted earlier today a picture of Phillip driving to Syracuse after, for the football game shortly after 9/11. Like just seeing something that I had never seen before was awesome. Yeah. Seeing people just talk about how much they enjoyed reading his stuff is awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Seeing some stories of, I ran into Phillip at this football game and he helped me find my way to my seat or something like that. I mean, it's just, generations upon generations of people that he impacted, Auburn fans and more. And so we appreciate everybody for listening, unless you guys have anything else you want to add. Like I said, we'll have lots of stuff on the site for everybody to kind of check back on if you're wondering, about that. And so we'll go ahead and call it there. We appreciate everybody for tuning in to this episode. This was really great to kind of be able to talk about our favorite, just not memories, but thoughts of Phillip, kind of what he meant to us. And so, guys, thank you so much, and appreciate everybody for listening. We'll talk to everybody soon.